All right, welcome back to the deep dive.
Yes, hello.
This time, we're diving deep into ancient Rome, but we're going beyond the togas and chariot races. You know what I mean?
Right?
You sent us some amazing stuff about the Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius,
Yes.
and their attempts to, like, totally reform Roman society.
Mm-mm.
Pretty audacious, and, it makes you think about how hard it is to change things, even today.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? How a story from, over 2,000 years ago can still feel so relevant.
Absolutely.
Sorry about economic inequality, corruption in politics, like all the big stuff that's still making headlines.
Totally. It's like they were dealing with like an ancient version of Occupy Wall Street or something.
Right.
But before we get into all that, let's set the stage a little.
Okay.
So Roman Republic, 2nd century BCE.
Right.
What was going on that made these brothers want to shake things up?
Well, at that time, Rome was militarily very successful.
Oh, yeah.
They'd conquered huge amounts of territory.
Yeah.
And all the spoils of war, gold, silver.
The good stuff.
And unfortunately, slaves were coming back to Rome. You'd think, prosperity for everyone, right?
Makes sense.
But here's where it gets interesting.
Yeah, so not everyone was enjoying the victory, huh?
Not at all. Actually, the influx of all this wealth and all these slaves actually created this huge problem.
Oh, wow.
See, small farmers, right, citizen soldiers who own their own land.
Yeah, the backbone.
Exactly, the backbone of Roman society. But suddenly, these massive estates popped up called latifundia.
Latifundia, okay.
They were worked by, you guessed it, slaves.
Oh, wow.
Owned by the super rich, the patricians.
Yokes.
And they just totally undercut the small farmers.
Oh, man. So, like, imagine you're this farmer, you've been working your land for generations, and then suddenly you just can't compete.
Yeah, exactly.
These giant, like, slave-run farms.
Absolutely. And many of these farmers, they lost their land. Ended up going to the cities, and it swelled the ranks of the urban poor.
Yeah.
And it created this huge gap between the haves and the have-nots, the patricians and the plebeians.
Yeah.
Like, watching the middle class just get hollowed out.
Yeah, that's a huge problem.
Right. And to make it even worse, the political system that was meant to balance everyone's interests started to break down. The Senate, which was supposed to represent the people, was getting dominated by the wealthy elite. The same patricians who were benefiting from this whole latifundia system.
Wow, yeah.
They were more interested in their own pockets than looking out for, the common good.
Yeah.
So it was a mess.
Okay, so then enters Tiberius Gracchus, right?
Right.
He comes from this, like, super elite family.
Yeah, super elite.
His mom was the daughter of Scipio Africanus.
The guy who defeated Hannibal.
Exactly. Like, you'd think he'd be pretty happy with the way things were, right?
Oh, we would.
But something set him on a very different path.
He was very troubled by what he was seeing.
Really?
Yeah, he saw it firsthand, during his military service in Spain. He saw how the common people were really struggling, and it really shook him, It was like this epiphany, oh, the system is rigged.
Wow. So what did he do?
Well, in 133 BCE, he was elected tribune of the plebs.
Okay, what is that exactly?
Powerful position, a voice for the common people. He could propose laws, veto things the Senate was doing.
Okay, so he had a platform to make some changes.
Exactly, and he wasted no time.
Okay.
He really believed that land reform was like the key to fixing the economic inequality that was tearing Rome apart. So he proposed this radical law called the Lex Sempronia Agraria.
Okay, wait. Lex Sempronia Agraria.
Right.
What does that mean?
Basically, the Sempronian agrarian law, named after his family, the Semproni.
Got it.
And this law was all about redistributing public land that had been illegally taken by the wealthy.
Oh, wow.
And giving it back to poor Roman citizens.
Oh, so like taking it from the latifundia?
Exactly. Break them up. Give those struggling farmers a chance.
Whoa, that's a pretty bold move. Taking on like the whole establishment.
Right. And it wasn't just about fairness either.
Okay.
Tiberius saw it as a national security issue.
Really?
Back then, land ownership was tied to military service.
Oh.
A strong army needed landowning citizens.
Makes sense.
By redistributing the land, he hoped to, boost Rome's military as well.
Wow, so how did the Senate react to this?
Well,
I mean, it was full of these wealthy landowners,
but
right?
you were not
I
thrilled.
bet they weren't thrilled.
They fought him tooth and nail.
Yes.
Every trick in the book.
But Tiberius wasn't backing down.
No, he did something really, really bold, like unprecedented.
Well,
He went over the Senate's heads
really?
and appealed directly to the People's Assembly. The assembly that actually had the power to pass laws.
Yeah.
Imagine, like, this fiery young reformer standing in front of thousands of people,
Yeah.
rallying them to his cause.
That's like an ancient Roman campaign rally.
It really was.
Did it work?
It did. The people were fed up.
Yeah.
They overwhelmingly supported his law.
So it just went around the Senate completely.
Bypassed them.
I bet they loved that.
They did not.
So what do they say?
They accused him of being a demagogue, a tyrant,
Wow.
threat to the Republic, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, but he didn't stop there.
No, he kept going.
What else did he do?
He, to make sure that his land reform went through,
Yeah.
he actually removed another tribune from office
What?
who was trying to, like, block the whole process.
Whoa, okay, so he's really pushing the boundaries now.
Yeah, he was pushing it.
So this didn't end well, I'm guessing.
No, sadly not.
Yeah.
The tension just reached a boiling point.
Mm-hmm.
And in 133 BCE, Tiberius was assassinated by a mob led by senators.
Oh my gosh.
They threw his body into the Tiber River.
Jeez, what a tragic ending for someone trying to, like, do some good.
Yeah.
So that's Tiberius Gracchus,
Mm-hmm.
a reformer who dared to, like, challenge the system and paid the ultimate price.
He did.
But the story doesn't end there.
It does not.
His younger brother, Gaius, picks up the torch like a decade later.
Exactly.
And he is, from what I understand, even more ambitious.
Oh, yeah. Gaius is, he's something else.
We'll get into all that after the break.
He's good.
So before the break, we were talking about Tiberius Gracchus and his pretty radical land redistribution plan.
Yeah, he really shook things up.
Didn't end well for him.
No, it didn't.
But as they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Mm-hmm.
His younger brother, Gaius, was about to enter the scene.
Yeah, Gaius is he's really a fascinating figure.
Yeah, it makes you think about, the whole idea of reform.
Right. The push and pull, the forces at play.
Yeah, and imagine, right, seeing your brother, someone you look up to,
Yeah.
murdered for trying to help people.
It must have been devastating.
Yeah, it really solidified Gaius's belief that, the system was broken.
Absolutely a turning point for him.
So it's 123 BCE,
Mm-hmm.
10 years after Tiberius's assassination, and Gaius is elected tribune of the plebs,
Wow.
following in his brother's footsteps.
That's right.
But Gaius didn't just, pick up where Tiberius left off.
No, he went way beyond.
Yeah, he took it to a whole other level.
He wasn't just focused on land reform.
Right.
He had this huge program targeted all sorts of things.
Like what?
Grain prices, military service, the courts, even citizenship rights.
Whoa, he was ambitious.
Oh, yeah. It's like he looked at the whole Roman Republic and said, we gotta fix this thing.
Wow, so where do we even begin?
Well, let's start with grain prices. That was a biggie.
Okay, why was that such a big deal?
Imagine living in ancient Rome, right? Crowded city.
Yeah.
You need grain to survive, but prices were going through the roof.
Oh, man.
People couldn't afford to eat.
Sounds familiar.
Right. So Gaius, he established state-subsidized grain for the poor.
Wait, the government would help people buy grain?
Exactly. They'd buy it and sell it at a lower price to those in need.
Wow, that's like a social safety net, centuries ahead of its time.
Yeah, some historians consider it one of the first examples in Western civilization.
I bet the people loved that.
They did. It was incredibly popular.
But I bet not everyone was happy.
No, the wealthy grain merchants were not fans.
Yeah, I bet they weren't, seeing their profits go down.
Right. It definitely made some enemies.
Okay, so grain prices, what else? You mentioned military service?
Yeah, back then, soldiers had to buy their own equipment.
Really?
Which was a huge burden, especially for the poor.
Yeah, that doesn't seem fair.
No, so Gaius changed that. He made the state provide the equipment.
Oh, okay, so it was more accessible to everyone.
Exactly. It leveled the playing field a bit.
Okay, but again, I'm sensing some resistance from the wealthy folks.
You're right. Those who liked having a monopoly on military power weren't happy.
Yeah, figures. Okay, what about the courts? You said those were corrupt, right?
Oh, yeah. Notoriously corrupt.
No, so.
Senators used their influence to get the judgments they wanted.
Oh, man. That's not justice.
No, so Gaius tried to change that. He wanted to take some of that power away from the Senate.
Give it to someone else.
Yeah, he wanted to give it to the equestrian class.
The equestrian class. Who are they?
Think of them as like the wealthy businessmen of Rome.
Okay, interesting. So he's playing one elite group against another.
Kind of. The idea was that the equestrians had different interests than the senators.
So maybe they wouldn't be as corrupt.
That was the hope, but who knows if it would have actually worked.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
It was a risky move for sure.
Okay, so we got grain subsidies, military reform, judicial reform, and then you mentioned citizenship rights. That's a big one.
Yeah, that was probably his most controversial proposal.
What was he trying to do?
He wanted to give citizenship to Rome's Italian allies.
Okay, why was that controversial?
Well, these allies, they'd fought alongside Rome for years.
Yeah.
But they didn't have full citizenship rights.
Oh, so Gaius thought that was unfair.
He did. He thought it was the right thing to do.
I can see that, but I can also see why some Romans wouldn't like it.
Oh, absolutely. Many people were afraid.
Of what?
That giving citizenship to these allies would dilute their own power, you know?
Yeah, like they'd be losing something.
Exactly. It backfired big time.
Even people who liked his other reforms.
Even some of them, yeah. It shows how sensitive the whole issue of citizenship was.
Right. Who belongs, who has power, it's a big deal.
It really is. It reminds us that even well-intentioned reforms can run into trouble.
Yeah, when they challenge people's core beliefs.
Exactly. It's a tough lesson.
So, with all this opposition, how did it end for Gaius?
Well, things went downhill pretty fast.
Yeah.
He was accused of trying to overthrow the Republic.
Oh, wow.
The Senate declared him an enemy of the state. His support started to disappear, and he knew his life was in danger.
So what did he do?
He chose to take his own life rather than be captured and executed.
Man, another tragic ending.
It really is.
It makes you wonder, is it even possible to change a system from within?
Yeah.
Especially when the people in power are so against it.
It's a tough question.
It's interesting, though, how Gaius took a different approach than Tiberius.
In what way?
Tiberius was more confrontational, right?
Yeah, he went head-to-head with the Senate.
Gaius seemed more strategic. He was trying to build alliances.
That's right, working within the system.
But I guess, in the end, it wasn't enough.
Unfortunately not, but they both taught us a lot, you know?
Yeah, about the complexities of power, reform, all that.
It's like they were running an experiment, you know?
Yeah.
A real-life experiment in what's possible, what's not.
And their failures, as tragic as they were,
Yeah.
they gave us these valuable lessons, things we can still learn from today.
Absolutely. Their legacy goes beyond their own lives.
That's for sure.
They forced Rome to face some really tough questions.
Yeah.
Questions that we're still asking ourselves today.
That's a great point, and we'll dive into that more after the break.
Sounds good.
You know, it's wild to think that even though their reforms failed in the end, the Gracchi brothers' story is still relevant.
Yeah.
Like over 2,000 years later.
It's amazing, isn't it?
What is it about these two guys that just keeps fascinating people?
I think it's that reminder, you know, that fighting for a more just world,
Yeah.
it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Absolutely.
They faced so much opposition, made mistakes.
Yeah.
They ultimately gave their lives for what they believed in.
They did.
But they also forced Roman society to look at its own problems, like really confront them.
What kind of problems?
Economic inequality, political corruption, that concentration of power, you know?
Yes, I'm familiar.
Right. Like, we're still dealing with these issues today.
Totally. All over the world.
Exactly. And the Gracchi brothers, they show us that even when reforms fail, they can, like, plant the seeds for change later on.
Oh, interesting.
Think about it. Their ideas, land redistribution, social safety nets, expanding citizenship, radical for their time.
Yeah.
But centuries later,
Yeah.
these are like basic ideas in modern democracies.
Wow. So they were ahead of their time in a way.
I think so. They laid the groundwork, you know,
Yeah.
for the kinds of reforms that eventually took hold.
Wow, that's a powerful legacy.
It is. And it's not just about, like, these big societal changes either. It's also about the power of individual action.
Yeah, like what can one person really do?
Well, think about the impact of their choices.
Mm-hmm.
They challenged the status quo. They spoke truth to power, even when it put their lives at risk.
It's inspiring in a way.
It is. It reminds us that we all have a role to play.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a senator or a tribune to make a difference.
Right.
It can start small, speaking up against injustice in your community,
Yeah.
supporting policies that promote fairness, or organizations working for a more just world.
Right. So like find your own way to make a difference.
Exactly. The Gracchi brothers teach us that even small acts of courage
Yeah.
can have a ripple effect.
Wow.
Their legacy isn't just about the specific reforms they fought for.
Right.
It's about that spirit of activism, the belief that a better world is possible.
So it's a call to action for all of us.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Gracchi brothers,
Yeah.
I think the question we're left with is like, what will our legacy be?
Right. What steps will we take, no matter how small, to create that more just and equitable world?
That's a great question, and I think it's one we all need to ask ourselves.
I agree.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Roman history.
It's been a pleasure.
It's amazing how, like, a story from so long ago can still be so relevant to the challenges we face today.
Absolutely.
And who knows, maybe it can even inspire us to, make a difference ourselves.
I hope so.
That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive.
Until next time.
See